Josh, thanks for joining us today for this lecture. For this week, we're discussing what's it like to reproduce leaders, and we're in the kind of the establishing phase of this new church. We've got everything started. We're working out some kinks, but we're also focusing on continuing with the mission, making disciples, but now reproducing leaders so that we can set ourselves up for multiplication. So we are in this kind of establishing and reproduction phase. And so what do we need to do to reproduce leaders? Any church, no matter the stripe, shape, size, or even approach of church, you're going to have leaders in all different kind of areas, different kind of giftedness, different approaches, different things. So I really want to talk today and kind of focus more on reproducing leaders who will be, kind of the key future pastors, planters, those type of leaders. And I know you guys at the Summit do a fantastic job of leadership development, have a great system and process for that. Have a lot of buddies who are going through your some of your programs now and some of your apprenticeships and your residencies. Got a good friend who's on staff and being developed, and just greatly appreciate what you guys do. So thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, man. Excited to be able to chat with you guys and contribute a little bit. I hope it's helpful.
Oh yeah, great. Well, tell us what you do there at Summit.
Yeah, so like Dustin said, my name's Josh Miller. My title here at Summit is I'm the Associate Pastor of Church Planting. I'm also the director of what's known as our apprenticeship program. If you kind of boil down my job into a couple things, a lot of what I do is I help guys that feel called to pastoral ministry get ready to do that. And specifically, kind of my specialization is helping guys that feel called to church planting to get ready to be a church planter. So I've been in this role I've been on staff for just over 3 years. We launched our apprenticeship program last fall. We've got 10 guys that are in a 2-year development experience to train them up and send them out as full-time pastors. So that's a little bit about what I do. One of the reasons that we're so passionate about this, not just developing leaders but developing pastors, is if you look at the history of the church, if you look through church history at times when real significant spiritual awakening happened and revival happened, a lot of times you can trace that to a number of churches, sometimes related and sometimes not, getting really serious about training the next generation of pastors, of people that would lead the church. It's really interesting if you look at the evangelical awakening that happened in England. So it preceded the Great Awakening here in the United States. That awakening produced guys like John Wesley, William Wilberforce, John Newton, Charles Simeon. Some of these guys that are just pillars of what we look to in terms of role models. You can trace most of those guys to the previous generation, and they were heavily invested in by a pastor or groups of pastors as they were growing up. And a lot of people argue, and I think convincingly, that a big reason why that generation made such an impact on both England and then the world was because the people before them had intentionally invested in them. And so our heart is we want to see God revive and move in a unique way, both here in North America and around the world. And we think that one of the best ways that we as a church can invite that kind of awakening, invite God to move in that way, is to invest a lot of time and intentionality into developing pastors. And so that's really what I do, and that's our heartbeat, and I'm excited to talk some more about that today.
Man, well, thank you so much for taking your time to do that. And one of the things that we'll kind of say here from the beginning, I think some pastors and leaders of smaller congregations that don't have a lot of resources, that kind of, maybe even the pastor, the only paid person on staff, that sort of thing, which could even reflect some of the students who will be watching, this video. No matter the size of your church, whether you're a summit of several thousand in multiple campuses or a small congregation of 45 in a small town of 1,000, you need to always be investing in, raising up, equipping, and sending out leaders and reproducing that. And so, so as we go through, I know a lot of your, I asked you to share a little bit of infuse some of the stories into what you're going to share, to how you guys have done some things, and I want you to share those for sure. And knowing that they come from a larger church, background and what you guys have been blessed with and been able to do for it. but it's going to be very easily translatable to any size church in any approach because there's so many foundational things of how to reproduce leaders, how to raise them up. So, man, I just want you to kind of take it away. You kind of hit some of the main points and ideas that and what you guys do to really, go through assessing, raising up, preparing, sending out leaders. So, just kind of walk us through some of those things.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And Justin, what I'll share here is something that we've really worked hard to say, man, what's the principle behind what we're doing that can be applied in any circumstance? Because God calls people into different ministries and different types of churches, and it's my conviction that all churches need to be discipling people, and part of that is raising up people that are godly that can lead the congregation. So I hope some of this can be helpful. I don't know if there's any baseball fans in the room, maybe some Kansas City Royal fans after this year. But if you follow baseball at all, one of the things that baseball people talk about a lot is what they call the 5 tools of baseball, right? The 5 tools of baseball. And you might know what those are, you might not. But the 5 tools are basically hitting for power, hitting for average, running, so base running, fielding, and arm strength. So those are the 5 tools of baseball. And basically what that is that is a picture that baseball scouts have developed to use in evaluating and developing baseball players. So if you're a high school player, you're a college player, and a scout is trying to decide if he's going to recommend that a team draft you, he's going to look at your game and he's going to compare it to the 5 tools of baseball. And he's going to say, all right, this guy's got 3 tools, so he can hit for power on a major league level, he can run the bases on a major league level, he's got a really strong arm. Okay, 3-tool guy, we'll draft him and put him at the AA level. They use the 5 tools to both identify prospects and to provide helpful concrete feedback. So, when the player comes in, they don't just say, hey, work hard for 2 years and I hope you make it to the majors. But they say, hey, you hit for power really well, and we want to keep growing in that, but man, we really need to focus on you hitting for average. Like, you hit a lot of home runs, but you bat 220, right? Your batting average 220, that's not going to cut it in the majors. And so we have to grow you in that area. So they use the 5 tools not only to assess potential prospects, but they use it to help them grow. And then they also use it to determine when someone is ready to move up to the next level of competition. So if I'm a AA player and I'm at this point in these 5 tools, that they know that when I'm at point B in the 5 tools, I'm ready to go up to AAA. And then when I'm at point C, I'm ready to go up to the major leagues. And then hopefully you can kind of track with that. That makes a lot of sense. But what I think we need to do if we're going to develop leaders in our churches is we sort of need to develop our own version of the 5 tools of baseball, right? It's not going to be hitting for power and throwing and those kind of things, but it's going to be the things that we look in the Bible and see this is what God calls a leader in the church to be, right? So one of those things is going to be character. So you want any leader in your church to have strong character. One of those things is going to be spiritual maturity. So you want them to have a vibrant spiritual life where they're growing in their love of God and their relationship with Christ. You want somebody that knows how to shepherd people, that is a competent counselor. So you can build out all these things. And what's helpful is once you identify what your picture is for your individual church, that gives you the ability to start identifying people in your church that aren't they maybe aren't ready for the major leagues yet, but you are seeing some of the components in them, right? So let's say you've got 4 or 5 things that you're looking for. If you see somebody in your congregation that's got 2 or 3 of them, that's somebody that you need to have your eye on that you can start developing. So in the same way that the 5 tools helps Major League Baseball scouts identify players that they want to draft and bring into their development system, it's going to help pastors and staff leaders to be able to identify people in their churches to pour their time into, right? Because pastors have a limited amount of time, so you can't invest the same amount of time in everyone, but there should be a handful of people that you say, man, those are some guys with some real leadership potential that I could really see leading in our church. I want to invest time in them. So I think the first step, Dustin, in developing a culture of leadership development in any size church, whether it's a church plant, established church, big church, small church, is a clear picture of what you're trying to develop.
Yeah,
a clear picture of what you're trying to develop. Paul does this for us, right? He does it for us when he gives us the qualifications of an elder. What was that? Well, that's a picture of what a pastor in the church needs to look like. And so it can help you walk someone in the process of growing there. So we're doing a very similar thing. We're just doing it with leadership rather than specifically with eldership, but same concept. So I think the first step, if I had to give like step number 1 on developing leaders in the local church, it's identifying a profile or a picture of what you want a leader to be. That's going to be different from church to church. It's going to depend on your context. But I would just encourage you guys to take some time, whether it's with other staff members or just by yourself, and get on a whiteboard and just list out the competencies or the characteristics or the skills that you feel like someone needs to have to be a leader in your church. Maybe they need to be able to teach because you want a leader to teach a Sunday school class. Well, that becomes one of your competencies. Maybe hopefully they need to have really strong godly character, so that becomes one of your competencies. And once you build that profile, it's going to allow you to do the rest of what I'm going to talk about is how do you create a system to start developing that in somebody. So step number 1 is to build a profile, develop your 5 tools of baseball. Once you've got that, then the question is, okay, how do you move someone from point A to point B along that process? And that's what I'll talk about for really the remainder of our time. And it's something that I think will be really helpful to you. It's pretty simple principles that we've built our whole system on here at Summit, and it's this. You want to identify different stages of leadership, right? So the next thing you want to do is you want to identify different stages of leadership. 3 that I'll offer to you I think are helpful are these. There's the stage where someone leads themselves. There's a stage where someone leads others. And there's a stage where someone leads leaders. So leads self, leads others, leads leaders. What I mean by leads self is someone who leads themselves is generally responsible. They know how to make a budget. They show up at their appointments when they say they're going to. You can count on them to be at Sunday school or in small group or there on the weekends. When you ask them to do something, they get it done. So that's somebody that knows how to prioritize their responsibilities. That's someone that knows how to deliver on what they promise to do. That's just general maturity in a lot of ways. And so that's the first stage that you want to bring somebody to. Now, it's just to be honest with you, a lot of people don't have this. And that's not like a knock on folks, but especially if you're dealing with a lot of college students or young professionals, sometimes people just never had to develop their own budget. They aren't in the habit of checking their email. Maybe some of you are in this stage, right? You don't check your email for 3 weeks and then can't figure out why you're late for everything, right? So the first thing you have to do is just honestly help people learn how to be responsible and mature, because nothing in your church is going to work if you can't count on your leaders to respond to emails or to respond to phone calls when you call. So lead self is the first stage of development. The next stage of development, the next kind of stop along the path, if you will, is leading others. So this person knows not just how to lead themselves and how to be responsible, but they know how to lead a group of people, right? So this is going to be, for example, a Sunday school teacher, a small group leader. If you have volunteer teams, this is going to be somebody that leads a volunteer team. What they know how to do is they know how to take a larger vision that they're receiving from the pastoral staff, and they know how to mobilize people to that vision. So they are good at taking tasks and assigning them to people. They know how to recruit people onto their team. They know how to manage personalities. Like if you're a small group leader, you know that you just have to develop some interpersonal skills, how to lead discussion appropriately, how to shepherd people, how to care for people well, how to multitask, all these things. When someone becomes a leader of others, they're not just thinking about themselves, and they're not just thinking about, okay, am I accomplishing what is my responsibility, but they're starting to ask the question, is our group accomplishing what our group is called to? So, for example, I'm a small group leader at our church, and I can't just think for myself and think, how am I doing spiritually? But one of my roles as the leader of that group is to ask the question, how are we doing spiritually? How is this group doing spiritually? What are the areas that our group needs to grow in? Where are we weak? Where are we strong? How is this person and that person doing? What's the dynamic of our group? Do we need to be hanging out more? Do we need to be doing more out in the community? That kind of thing. So when somebody moves from leading self to leading others, they tend to think more broadly, not just about themselves, and they're starting to understand how to recruit people to a vision and how to lead a group towards something. The last stage is, I would say, leading leaders. So you have leading self, leading others, and now you have leading leaders. And this is a person that is leading the small group leaders. So a lot of times at the leading leaders stage, you might be a pastor, you might be on staff, you might be an elder, something like that. And what that person is doing is they're providing overall vision and encouragement to those who are doing the primary leading of the people. So for example, I'm a small group leader at my church, but I'm also an elder. And so one of my roles as an elder is I encourage and shepherd and coach other small group leaders. So when I'm doing that, I'm actually leading leaders because I'm asking specific questions, I'm encouraging them, I'm reminding them of the vision, I'm praying for them, I'm asking questions that are specific to those who lead others about burnout questions, encouragement questions, those kind of things. Someone who leads leaders is often going to be responsible for reminding people of the vision, reminding people of why they're doing what they're doing in the midst of their daily lives. Leading leaders is really, if you can get people to leading leaders, your church is just going to run itself. Because you're going to be able to give them vision, and they're going to take it, and they're going to equip all kinds of other people. And so that's kind of the end goal. You're not going to have you're not always going to have an enormous amount of these people. You might not have any of them for a long time. But it's the goal, because in a lot of ways that's when you're really getting into equipping the saints for the work of ministry. Rather than being down in the trenches doing it all, you're equipping other people to do it. And I think that's really what Ephesians 4 is calling a pastor or a staff member to do. So if you're a church planner, that's really the goal where you want to get people. So the question is, we've got these 3 points. Think about it like on a line, okay? So point 1, leading self. Point 2, leading others. Point 3, leading leaders. The question is, how do you get someone from point 1 to point 2 and then from point 2 to point 3? Right? That's really where you get into the nuts and bolts of how do you develop a leader. Well, I think what's important is not what you do, but that you have something that gets people along that moves people along that path. So you might call it a vehicle, right? So if we think about this as like a road map, what's your vehicle that's getting people from point A to point B to point C, right? One way that you probably understand this is, let's say you have someone that's just attending your church, right? So they're just attending, they're not really connected, they're coming on Sundays, and you really want to see them going from being disconnected to connected. Well, you probably have a vehicle to make that happen. It's probably Sunday school or small groups, right? That's your vehicle to move someone from point A disconnected to point B connected. So what do? Well, you get to know them, you preach about it, you preach about the importance of community, about being in small groups, you provide them an action step, and you say, hey guys, go out into the lobby, and there'll be somebody taking down information to connect you to a small group or a Sunday school class, and we'd love for you to go there, put down your information, and we'll be in touch. And so that's a vehicle, right? Well, we're going to do the same thing when it comes to leadership development, right? So let's say you have a whole bunch of college students, and they're really irresponsible, and you want to develop them from being irresponsible to being a leader of self. Well, part of what that might look like is, helping them understand the importance of responding to email, budgeting, being responsible, following through on their commitments. That can be something as simple as having them start serving in a ministry where it's really important for them to be there, right? So, ask them to serve in your kids' ministry for 6 weeks, and just help them understand, like, look, if you're not here, our ratios are off, and all of a sudden we're not taking care of these kids well, right? Or maybe it's you just give them, maybe you have a program where they can come for the summer and they can just be an intern and they can just work on things that are helpful. They don't have to be big projects, but hey, come in and just learn how to set up meetings and how to respond to your email and how to be places on time. Give them a book to read and say, hey, I'd love for you to read the next 6 chapters of this book, and then we're going to talk about it next time. And if they don't do it, right, obviously they only read 2 of the chapters and you can tell, right, then okay, that's an opportunity to have a conversation about why it's important to be a man or woman of your word, why it's important to follow up on your commitments in a way to honor Christ. So you have a vehicle. You have a vehicle to move somebody from one point to the next. Yeah. So let's say you've got someone who's good at leading self. You have a confidence in them that they are good, responsible, they know what they're doing, and you want to move them into a lead others role. So you want to help them become a small group leader. So that's your goal. You say, okay, this person comes, they serve in the nursery, they're consistent, I see this in them, I want to help them become a small group leader. How do you do that? Well, I think you're going to want to develop a small group training curriculum, right? So you're going to want to develop something that helps them go from leading self to leading others, right? And this is going to get back at the 5 tools of baseball, right? So you've got certain competencies that you've laid out and said, this is what I want this person to have to be a leader at our church. So your training, your small group training, should be correlating with those things, right? So if one of the things that you want people that are going to be your small group leaders to be able to do is to interpret the Bible well, right? So if you want someone to be able to interpret the Bible well and teach it if they're going to be your small group leader, well, part of your small group training curriculum probably needs to be some hermeneutics, some basic, how do you read the Bible and understand what it's saying, and how do you interpret it faithfully and apply it well, so that when they're a small group leader and you're studying Scripture, they can lead the group in understanding the Bible and how it applies to their life. So you can do that in a number of categories. So studying and teaching the Bible is one. Another would be, hey, we want people that are our small group leaders to understand how to host well, right? We want them to know how to make people feel welcome and hospitable. Well, maybe you have somebody in your church that's really good at that. They're just very hospitable. Come in and share for 20 or 30 minutes with the group. This is why I'm so passionate about hospitality, and here are some best practices for hospitality. You can imagine you can kind of do this, forever and ever, and you can develop a better and better training process, which I think is exciting. You're just always getting better at it. But you want something. You just need something that the person participates in to help them grow from leader of self to leader of others. and you want there to be some on-ramps for that are pretty easy. So you don't want to make it so hard to get into that class that you can't ever develop anybody. So I'd recommend making it user-friendly. You can use online tools. You can do something as easy as recording a training video on Skype, like I'm doing right now, and asking people to watch, 3 or 4 training videos before they come on maybe on a Saturday, or maybe early on a Wednesday morning, something like that. You as a pastor or staff member can, you can meet with 4 or 5 people at a time for breakfast on Friday, and just walk people through some training that you're doing. It doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't have to be complicated. I just think you need to have some plan for moving people from point A to point B. All right, so you've got people training, they're growing. Okay, now they're leading other people. They're your small group leader. They're doing great, and you're saying, man, I really see a lot of potential in that man or that woman to lead leaders, to be somebody that's really taking on a significant role of leadership in our church. Well, what do you do to get them there? Well, it's actually way simpler than you think. You just do the same thing you did to get somebody from leading self to leading others, and you just do it to get them from leading others to leading leaders. So there's going to be a new level of competency that they're going to need. So using the Bible study example, a small group leader needs to be able to understand how to read, interpret, and apply Scripture faithfully. If you're going to put somebody over in authority over a number of leaders at your church, you want them to become not just a beginner at interpretation and teaching, but you want them to be pretty proficient in it. You might want to hear them teach several times. So you might want to ask them to prepare a 10-minute lesson that they might teach to a Sunday school class, and have them share it with you, and then you give them feedback and you help them think through, okay, how could I have done this better? Maybe you want to get a book, a book on interpreting and teaching the Bible well. So something like Grasping God's Word, or How to Read the Bible for All It's Worth, or Faithful Preaching by Tony Merida. And you're just going to walk through that book with them over a period of time. So maybe over 6 weeks, you guys are going to read the book together. You're going to get together every 2 weeks and talk about it. And in that process, that man or woman is becoming more apt at understanding and teaching God's Word. You're probably going to want to talk about some leadership competencies as well. So one of the things that a leader of leaders is going to need to be able to do is remind the people underneath of him why they're doing what they're doing. What is their vision? Why is this important in the church? So you might want to go over again and again and again with those people, hey, here's the vision of the church. This is why we're doing what we're doing. This is why it matters. This is why it's important. Get them charged up so then they can go and pour that into others. One of the things we say around here is that vision leaks. So if you think about a bucket with holes in it, or like one of those sand pails at the beach that's got all the holes in it, you pour water in there and you hold it up long enough and it all comes out until it's gone. Well, that's what happens with vision, with church vision in particular, because everyone has a lot of things that are happening. I mean, we all have so many things that are happening in our lives that are demanding our attention, that are demanding our love and our affection. And one of our jobs as leaders in the church is to remind people why it matters, why the church matters, that this is the institution that God has chosen to advance His mission, to call people into His family, to glorify His Son, and that really matters. And so we want to be reminding our leaders of that so that they can turn around and remind our leaders of others. So that's what I would say is really the building blocks of developing a leadership development structure in any size church. What's really beautiful about this is that once you get your vehicles established, so once you decide, okay, this is the training we do to go from A to B, here's the training from B to C, you can start running that thing. You can tweak it here and there, but you start getting that thing well oiled and churning people out, and you make adjustments along the way. And what can happen is not only are you developing more leaders to bless your church and to make disciples at your church, but you're going to see people in that process that you recognize in them, man, I think that guy could be a church planner. I think that guy's got the right kind of giftings. He feels called to ministry. He's really eating this stuff up. And then you can take that guy aside and do some more specific training about being a church planner that it sounds like you guys have been learning a lot from Dustin about some of these things that get into the more nuts and bolts of church planting. So that's what I would say. Really, it's not. It seems really simple. I don't know if any of it's real profound, but I'd say number one, in summary, develop your 5 tools. So figure out what a leader wants to look like. Number 2 is develop what your levels of leadership are going to be. That's lead self, lead others, lead leaders, and what correlates to those things in your ministry. So maybe, is leading others Sunday school, is that small group? What is that? Is leading leaders a deacon? Is that an elder? Whatever that is for your church. And then the last thing is develop vehicles that move people from point A to point B. If you're able to do that, man, with the grace of God, and a lot of prayer and work and flexibility, I think you're going to start to see people really grow and really get excited about the mission of the church and the role that they're getting to play in it.
Yeah.
So,
No, I think it's great. I mean, so much of what you're saying really adds a lot of meat to our previous week's topic, which was on a leadership pipeline. What is your pipeline for working, getting someone from being a new believer, a new disciple, to whatever level they may be of whether they're a ministry leader or a small group leader or maybe even a future planter or pastor type thing. And so we talked a lot about and the ideas of themselves, others, and leaders. We talked about a disciple who was understanding the gospel for themselves. They're learning what obedience to Christ. They're following the Great Commandment, the Great Commission. They're learning those things that kind of fits themselves. But then they're also become a discipler. They're someone and they're investing in other people. They're sharing the gospel. They're leading discipleship groups. They're doing that sort of thing, but they're starting to invest in others. And then we start talking about becoming an apprentice to be a leader. And so how leaders are mentoring and raising up an apprentice, and the leader and even the coach level is overseeing other leaders and that sort of thing. And so this really, really adds a lot of really great meat to kind of the pipeline that we had discussed. And we kind of discussed an open-ended pipeline to where it's really going to be contextually fit for your church. You've got to go in and really say, this is the structure of church. Here are the kinds of leaders we need for the different ministries that make up our church body. And so what are those things that we're going to, how are we going to get a person from who's just attending or they're just dropping their kids off to where they are going to be one of our key children's ministry leaders in just a year or two. So man, thanks for kind of outlining that for us. Just a few questions to kind of wrap up a little bit. So as you're bringing a person from you're identifying and you're looking out among the church body and you're saying, man, we've got this need and we need someone who can kind of fill this gap. And I know there's some assessing going on in there, but what is one of those kind of 2 or 3 maybe key things that you're looking for in a person when you've got maybe even a new ministry and you don't exactly know who's going to be the right fit? So what are those things that you're looking for in just an average layperson, for instance, to lead a ministry? What are some of those kind of characteristics that you're looking for?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think a lot of this is going to depend on your particular church model and what you define your 5 tools to be. So we have a pretty developed profile for what a church planner needs to be from our church, and we've developed that using our model and what we've seen to be successful. So it's not like a golden rule. But I would just ask yourself the question: what does a leader need to be able to do and be to lead our church in a healthy way? And get on the whiteboard and write up some things. And what will probably happen is the adjectives or the things that you put up there, you'll probably start to realize that there are actually some categories. And I find those categories really helpful. So I'll give you our 5 categories for a church planner just as something to chew on. Our first one is character. So that's everything from the qualifications of an elder to humility to someone who roots their identity in the gospel to someone who's generous, someone who's has high integrity, all those things. So character is our first one. Second one is calling. So that's a little bit different because it's a church planning profile, but you just want somebody that wants to do what you're asking them to do. Someone that feels a sense that this is what God wants them to do, not just, well, yeah, I'm here, so I'll do it, but you want somebody that's excited about the ministry. So character, calling. The third one is convictions. So you want to make sure that you have leaders in your church that share your church's theological and philosophical convictions. Yeah. Sometimes people call that DNA or culture. It's all kind of the same word for the same thing. Basically, people are going to look to your leaders as an extension of your church, and so you want to make sure that theologically you're on the same page on the major issues, and that philosophy is kind of how you do ministry. You're on the same page philosophically. So a good example, if your church is a Sunday school church, you don't want to put someone in front of a Sunday school class who hates Sunday school. It's just not going to work out well. If they can't get over it and they just think you should be doing small groups, that's fine, but you should not make them a Sunday school teacher. Because it's just going to create division in your church. Instead, you want someone that can share your philosophy of ministry. So character, calling, convictions. The fourth one is competencies. So competencies are, what does this person need to be able to do their job well as a leader? So if you're a Sunday school teacher, you need to be able to teach the Bible. So you have to be able to interpret and teach the Bible. You have to be able to create community. And so you have to have a certain amount of people skills. You have to understand how to connect people. You have to be administratively responsible. So you have to respond to emails, in a reasonably quick fashion. Maybe you want this person to be a recruiter, so you want them to be able to go out and bring people into their Sunday school class that aren't connected in your church right now. Maybe you have, only 60% of the people in your services are in your Sunday school class. Well, you want a Sunday school teacher to be a recruiter. So competencies is one of those. And then the last one for us is chemistry. So character, calling, convictions, competencies, and chemistry. Chemistry just means it's a little bit harder to put words around. Chemistry just means the kind of man or woman that you just want to do ministry with.
Yeah.
So they're the type of person, they don't have to be, like the most socially engaged person in the world, but they're just somebody that has a great spirit, that's excited to be there, that has humility, that is going to be an encouragement to your team rather than a divisive factor on your team. Just a little free piece of advice here. No leader is worth the headache of divisiveness.
Yeah.
So even if somebody is really, really gifted and you're like, man, they've got so many skills and I need this leader, it is going to make your life really hard and it's going to make your church's life really hard if you've got people in leadership that aren't on board and aren't on the same team. Unity in leadership is one of the most precious things that a church can have. So pray for that, and I'd be really, really intentional to protect that.
Yeah.
Another thing, Dustin, I'd say, and this is just, again, kind of a off the cuff here.
Go for it.
But I think one of our problems in the church sometimes is we tend to talk about leadership from a point of need. So we say, man, we need more kids volunteers. So we get up and we tell everybody, we need kids volunteers. You need to volunteer. Don't you want to help the children? We need you. We need you. And I think there's a time to talk about your need, but think about yourself. Most people aren't motivated long-term by need. Think about if you hear a really heart-wrenching story about someone in some country that needs your aid. You might give $50 as a one-time gift because you just feel bad, right? There's a need. But what that's not going to do is it's not going to create investment or buy-in on your part, which is different from vision. So let's say somebody comes along and says, hey, I think that you want to be a part of making a difference in the world. I think that your life should make this world a better place. And I know that you are passionate about helping people. Well, let me tell you about an opportunity that we have as the body of Christ to put a display of the gospel on in blank foreign country by supporting blank orphanage. What's going to happen is we're gonna raise the temperature of the gospel in that area. We're going to give kids a home. Do you see how it's just a completely different approach?
Yeah.
Too often we come with need because it's immediate and it gets us results the next week, but it will burn your people out. If you come with vision, what happens is people they go from just being slightly involved to being owners of the mission. They go from, okay, I'll come and serve in the nursery because the pastor told me to, man, I'm responsible for the discipleship of these kids for the next hour and a half, and this might be the only time in this kid's week that they hear the gospel. Wow, man, that's a huge difference. And that's just a little thing that we've really tried to change. It's hard. It's a habit. We tend to use the word need a lot, but as much as you can, don't recruit from need, recruit from vision, because it's going to be a longer-term buy-in from your people, and they're going to be more excited about it. It's going to be better for their development. So
you can do that, from the pulpit, and you can also do it individually. You can shoulder tap somebody and say, man, it would be awesome if you were serving here, and just kind of cast a vision for how that person can make an impact. Man, as we kind of wrap up, I know that your pastor, J.D. Greer, most recent book, is it Gaining by Losing, I think? Yeah, Gaining by Losing. I've got my copy just a few weeks ago. I haven't had time to read it, so that's on my...
I won't tell him, don't worry.
Okay, yeah. It's a... I love the idea, and it's one that I've heard... you folks there at Summit share, and other churches who are about reproducing leaders. I did a Skype call with Dave Ferguson the other day with Exponential and New Thing, and he talked about how tough it was when they had raised up a guy who was he was going to be a stout leader in their church. And it was just. He said in the interview, this is the guy that I wanted my kids for him to be their youth pastor. Like, I selfishly wanted my kids to learn from him for years. He was going to be great, but he wanted to go plant in a completely different state. And he talked about how tough it was for them to send that guy because he was his best. Now, I know the book, the gist of it is how your church can really gain by sending out its best. Tell me a little bit about how that affects. So I know you folks have a culture of that. And most churches don't. Most churches don't want to lose their best, especially if they're smaller and they got a really great youth pastor. Why would we want to send them to go plant our pastor? And that kind of mentality. Tell me a little bit about kind of what it feels like when you've got some of your best, and then you've got to get them out the door because it's going to be better. Tell me some of the feeling and especially with you in the leadership development side of it. When you're seeing a guy, man, it would be great to keep him here, but you got to see him. What's that feel like?
Yeah. So I'm kind of like it. I kind of have the advantage that pretty much my whole job is to make people leave our church, which is kind of strange. It's a struggle. I mean, it's not. I'm not going to sit here and say, man, it's really easy. It's hard when you've invested in somebody for years and years and you care about them deeply to send them out. One of the guys we just planted in Charlotte, Spence Shelton, came to Summit as a college student. Came to Summit as a college student. He had been around our church almost since JD has been here. JD's invested a huge amount into him, and Spence was our spiritual formation pastor, which meant he was leading the discipleship of our entire church.
Wow,
really important role. So, man, there's a large sense that it was really hard to send him and to do so joyfully. I think it gets back to what JD harps on in the book, is that we really have to ask ourselves the question: are we more interested in thy kingdom come or my kingdom come? And it's a hard issue, right? Because when you send people out, it doesn't always benefit your church in the sense that you would like it to. It doesn't. Dave Ferguson sends out that youth pastor, and in a very real sense, his kids don't have as good of a youth pastor.
Yeah.
Right now, I think God is in that, and I think God, just like He does, with financial giving, I think a lot of times He surprises us, and He does things that maybe we don't see coming, and He provides in a new way. But yeah, there is a certain loss to it. There's a certain sacrifice to it. But I think you just have to come back to the gospel in the sense that, man, the gospel is both the cross and the crown, right? The gospel is both pick up your cross and follow me, and you will be seated with me in paradise. And we just have to wrestle with that as churches, as church leaders, to say, what it means to advance the kingdom sometimes will mean hardship and sadness for our church, but recognizing that there's no one that cares about your church as much as God does. There's nobody that cares as much about your youth ministry as God does. I mean, there's just not. And developing something like a leadership pipeline, like you talked about last week and some of what we talked about today, really helps this, because what will happen, and we've seen this happen at the Summit, is as people start to recognize that you're a church that will train and send them out, other leaders start to say, man, that's the kind of church I want to be a part of. So sometimes you send out that student pastor that you just couldn't imagine not having, and then God raises up somebody new that you didn't even know had that potential, and all of a sudden they've got an opportunity to lead, and they're doing a great job. Yeah. That's one thing that we've seen around here. I mean, we've seen a lot of people that God has raised up. I mean, I'm not going to say that's going to be a one-to-one correlation. It's not always going to happen that way, but we've seen that happen. And just on a practical sense, Dustin, I mean, this might sound a little pragmatic, but at some point, if there's somebody that is called to plant a church or is called to go somewhere else, you can either lose them or you can send them.
I mean, yeah.
In reality, if you're going to try to hold them into a position that they don't feel like God has called them to, they're going to get discouraged and not do their job well, or they're just going to say, "I've got to go," and It's going to get ugly. So in some regards, it's better to just say, "Hey, we want to bless you. We want to send you out into the work of the kingdom." And then that way, hey, you can rejoice and you can celebrate, and you can be proud of that youth pastor that was with you guys for 4 years, and then you sent him out to plant a church in the next town over, and that can be an event of celebration rather than a kind of bitter, oh, I can't believe he left to go plant a church in one town over. So I don't know. I think this is something that we're working on. We don't have all the answers, but it's something we've seen God doing in our church, and we're excited to kind of see what He does next with it.
Well, man, that's great, and it is it's beautiful to see many churches, and even some older established churches that have been around for a while, so really starting to grasp the idea that they didn't just lose their youth pastor for him to go and pastor, but they can send him, and they are being part of the larger church, the larger body of Christ. And man, thank you, Josh, for what you do there at Summit, for leadership. Thank you for your what your church is doing. I know that. Many other churches learn from you guys. They watch what you do, and so you're benefiting, more than just RDU. You've benefited us as a school. I was actually looking at the the list for the people who are doing lectures for me this week, and it's you, John Welsh, and Derek Delane. So it's all Summit guys who are in here for this week talking about reproducing. And so I value what you guys do and greatly appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Excited about what's going on at Piedmont, and man, really value our partnership. So look forward to what God has got in store for us in the future.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much.